A top Essex detective warned yesterday that there could be reprisals after the slaughter of 3 suspected drug dealers. Detective Superintendent Ivan Dibley said after the inquest opened on the 3, "I think there's a real chance that there could be repercussions." The killings had left a vacuum in the drugs distribution network in the county. "It will be filled very quickly because there is big money to be made," Mr Dibley said. "I believe the criminal fraternity in Essex are now looking over their shoulders." The 3 who died, Anthony Tucker, 38, Craig Rolfe, 26 and Patrick Tate, 37, were found in Rolfe's Range Rover last Thursday. It was parked in a farm lane at Rettendon near Chelmsford. All had been shot at close range the evening before. The killer used a sawn-off double-barrelled 12-bore shotgun. Mr Dibley said the gun would only have been 6 inches away from each man when it was fired. The weapon has not been found, and he admitted the chances of finding it were now slim. He said, quote, "We are in contact with other forces who have had drugs-related killings. Certainly nowhere else in this country has seen 3 people killed in this way." Detectives believe that whoever killed the 3 was in the Range Rover with them. Mr Dibley said the killer must have been very cool to act as he did. It was likely that a second vehicle, driven by an accomplice, must have been near the scene. At the inquest, which was opened and adjourned to a date to be fixed, Coroner's Officer PC Derek Sewell said all 3 men had been identified by fingerprints. A post-mortem examination carried out by Home Office pathologist Dr Paula Lanas revealed that Tate died from multiple shotgun wounds and the other 2 died from shotgun wounds to the head. At least 8 cartridges were discharged from the gun. Mr Dibley said the shots would have been fired very quickly. It is believed each of the victims was shot once and then the killer fired again to finish them off. At the inquest, coroner Dr Malcolm Weir said although the victims were somewhat unsavoury, they were human. Mr Dibley told him, quote, "We are going all out to identify the person responsible. A lot of people would say nobody's going to miss them, but the person who has done this to these 3 men is in some ways worse than them. Society demands that I investigate this as thoroughly as possible to bring whoever is responsible to justice." The following newspaper article is from 1995 with the headline, "Behind the peace and love of rave culture is big money and big crime." As the icy dawn of Thursday broke over the flatlands of southwest Essex, Peter Theobald of White House Farm went out to feed his pheasants. He and his friend bricklayer Kenneth Jiggins had often joked about the route they drove towards the open fields. A rutted, snow-covered track where they'd previously noticed not only the debris of lovers' assignations, but empty blown safes abandoned by robbers. 300 yards from the road, their way was blocked by a stationary Range Rover. Mr Jiggins got out to investigate. As he moved to tap on the driver's window, he stared in horror. The 2 men slumped in the front seats had no faces. Behind them, a third man lay with his abdomen ripped asunder. The car interior was thickly caked in congealed, freezing blood. Mr Jiggins had stumbled on the aftermath of one of Britain's worst gangland killings, the product of deadly long-running conflicts centred on the trade in youth culture's most popular drug, ecstasy. The 2 men in the front, Craig Rolfe, 26, who bought the Range Rover just a fortnight ago, and Tony Tucker, 38, sometime bodyguard to boxer Nigel Benn, could be identified only by their fingerprints. Police believe the killer first shot the man in the back seat, Patrick Tate, 37, and that Rolfe and Tucker then turned to face him. The assassin was a professional who used the advantage of surprise to blast 3 men to death with a pump-action shotgun in the space of 1 or 2 seconds. He would have believed he had no time to waste. It was only rarely, police sources say, that any of the 3 victims, who were all violent criminals, ventured out unarmed. There were no weapons found on the bodies. This, the police believe, is the biggest clue to the murderer's identity. For Tate, Rolfe and Tucker to have agreed to travel to such a remote spot without being tooled up suggests they knew and trusted their assailant, who was almost certainly a close criminal associate. The likelihood is that he travelled with them to the fatal rendezvous. Yesterday, as the murder squad, led by Detective Superintendent Ivan Dibley, continued piecing together the history of the victims' connections and possible vendettas, it was clear that the killings fell into a pattern. Sandwiched between Harwich, one of the principal entry ports for ecstasy, cannabis and amphetamines imported from the Netherlands, and organised crime's traditional stamping ground in East London, Essex has become a national black spot for violent criminality. Tate, Rolfe and Tucker were all members of a widespread villains exodus from the East End. All had served long prison sentences for armed robberies, burglaries, organised car theft and serious assaults. At the time of their deaths, all were wanted target criminals, being kept under surveillance by the elite detective unit responsible for the fight against organised crime, the South East Regional Crime Squad. The police have a series of videos taken in and around the Highwayman public house in Basildon, which the gang used as a base for dealing in ecstasy and a range of other drugs. Some of the tapes depict Tate and Rolfe administering savage beatings to customers and minor league dealers who had somehow displeased them. In others, they are shown slashing victims in the face with knives. Yet despite this evidence, the police had not been able to prosecute. Not one of the victims was prepared to make a formal statement to detectives, let alone agree to give evidence in court. Tate himself had been on the receiving end of earlier vicious attacks, and he too had refused to talk to the police. Not, however, through fear, but as a result of the unbreakable underworld taboo against becoming a grass. Last year, he was shot in the arm on his Basildon doorstep. The incident led to his own appearance in court, charged with possessing an illegal firearm found beneath his hospital bed. He was released from jail only 5 weeks before his death. In his case, it was already grimly apparent. Another few months in prison had done nothing to rehabilitate him. On the night before his murder, he ordered a home delivery pizza with different toppings on each quarter. Told this was not on the menu, he drove to the restaurant, hurled the till against the wall, then brutally assaulted the manager Roger Ryle, punching him and smashing his head against a glass plate stacked in the sink. Mr. Ryle suffered severe cuts and concussion, but he too declined to press charges after police warned him that Tate, an 18-stone bodybuilder, might easily decide to return to do more damage. On an earlier occasion, when he was wanted for robberies, Tate hurled an off-duty police officer through a plate glass window after he was seen in a supermarket. 2 years ago, he attacked 3 officers escorting him to court and overpowered them. He escaped on a waiting motorcycle which had been provided by his associates and ended up in Spain. Then he made the mistake of visiting Gibraltar, where he was arrested and extradited. Another case linked to the murders is that of Darren Kerr, alias Matthew Evans, a known business associate of the 3 dead men. Last August, he was abducted from the streets of Purfleet and had acid thrown in his face. As he recovered in Billericay Hospital, a gunman dressed as a clown shot him in the chest. The gun had been concealed in a bunch of flowers. Kerr recovered from the attack and he too refused to make any kind of statement to the police. But the murder squad is working on the theory that the clown with the gun and the White House Farm killer may be the same man. In moving from robbery and other forms of theft to the lucrative trade in drugs, Tate, Rolfe and Tucker conform to a wider pattern. Tate is known to have formed a close relationship with the leading Basildon crime family for whom he is thought to have been working during his time in Spain. Detective Inspector Barry Cooper of the National Criminal Intelligence (NCIS) Drugs Unit said, "The people involved with the sale and to some extent the UK manufacture and importation of ecstasy and amphetamines are traditional criminals who have entered the trade for money, with established criminal connections. Some of them are East Londoners in their 50s and 60s who have been around a long time. They were street thugs in the 50s, armed robbers in the 60s and 70s, then maybe importers of cannabis. In my 28 years of police service, they are people I have known about for a long time. They have a wide variety of convictions, including serious violence. You are dealing with an economic commodity, and if you invest money, sometimes you have to protect your investment." This, Mr. Cooper went on, is the inescapable reality behind the peace and love message espoused by teenage rave culture, which since the late 1980s has sponsored the spread of ecstasy to the point where it is everywhere. The following newspaper article is from the 21st of the 10th, 1997, with the headline, "Pat blamed me for attempt on his life." A witness at a gangland triple murder trial has told how one of the victims had blamed her for an earlier attempt on his life. Annette Damont told the Old Bailey that murdered drugs baron Pat Tate claimed she was responsible for a shooting at his house in November 1994. Tate, 37, suffered a gunshot wound to his arm following the attempted murder at his bungalow in Gordon Road, Basildon. Tate and associates Tony Tucker, 38, of High Road, Fobbing, and 26-year-old Craig Rolfe of Calshot Avenue, Chafford 100 Greys, were blasted to death with a shotgun as they sat in their Range Rover in Workhouse Lane, Rettendon, on December 6, 1995. The trio had been lured there on the promise of a large cocaine deal, unaware that an ambush had been laid for them. They had earlier been outraged at poor quality cannabis allegedly supplied by 54-year-old Michael Steele, who is jointly charged with the killings along with accomplice Jack Womes. Both Steele of Great Bentley, Essex, and 36-year-old Womes of Brockford, Suffolk, deny the charges. The jury heard Miss Damont had known Tate for about 2 years before his death. Mr. Lederman QC, representing Womes, asked Miss Damont, quote, "Tate, you would agree, was a deeply unpleasant man." Miss Damont replied, "Yes." The lawyer added, "And for no reason Tate blamed you for him being shot." Miss Damont replied, "Yes." Mr. Lederman continued, "Which was completely untrue." Miss Damont replied, "Yes." She said she had accompanied her then-boyfriend, car dealer Barry Dorman, on a day trip to Ostend on November 16, 1995. The couple met up with Tate, Craig Rolfe and 3 teenage girls at a cafe bar in Ostend. Annette, Mr. Dorman and Tate left to go to his hotel room, where she told the jury she saw bundles of notes laid out on a bed. Miss Damont said, "I thought it was a car deal. I don't know how much there was. Pat was very hyped up. He looked on edge. He was very fidgety and was rushing about all over the place." It is then alleged that Mr. Dorman and his girlfriend took £30,000 cash back with them to the UK, which was later collected by Tucker and Tate. The money is alleged to have been part of a cash refund from an Amsterdam drug dealer following a cannabis deal which went wrong. Mr. Dorman told the court he had earlier lent Tate £10,000 for what he thought was a car deal. He said, quote, "I knew Pat Tate very well, and I often loaned him money to buy cars. I lent it to him as a friend, but I was practically forced into going with him to Ostend. He seemed to be quite desperate." Mr. Dorman said while he was at Ostend he met another man who he did not know. That man is believed to be Michael Steele, but when Mr. Dorman and Miss Damont attended Colchester Police Station in July 1996, they failed to pick out Steele from an identity parade. Steele is alleged to have masterminded the drugs operation. The court heard that during a police search of Steele's house last May, a wallet containing a Dutch phone card was found. It is alleged that Steele was involved in the importation of cannabis from Amsterdam to the UK between August 1st and November 17th, 1995. Both Steele and Womes deny the importation charges. Steele also denies possessing a pump-action shotgun. Co-defendant Peter Corey of London Road, Clacton, Essex, denies conspiracy to import cannabis. The trial continues. The following newspaper article is from the 22nd of the 10th, 1997, with the headline, "Ex-Boss's Praise for Murder Suspect." A suspect accused of a triple gangland killing was given a glowing reference from his former employer at the Old Bailey yesterday. Miss Scarlett Edgar told the jury 36-year-old Jack Womes was an honest person who she could trust with anything. Womes of Main Road, Brockford, Suffolk, is charged along with 54-year-old Michael Steele with the murders of drug barons Pat Tate, Tony Tucker and Craig Rolfe. The 3 men were gunned down with a pump-action shotgun as they sat in their Range Rover in a deserted country lane in the Essex village of Rettendon on December 6, 1995. Tate, 37, Tucker, 38 and 26-year-old Craig Rolfe had been lured to remote Workhouse Lane on the promise of a large cocaine deal, unaware an ambush had been laid. The trio had earlier been outraged by poor quality cannabis allegedly supplied by Steele of Angers Green, Great Bentley, Essex. Steele and Womes both deny murder. 2 hitmen were allegedly driven away unwittingly from the murder scene by Supergrass Darren Nichols. The court heard Miss Edgar, who owns G&T Commercials at Barham, Suffolk, praise Womes. She told the jury, quote, "Jack Womes was employed by me as a mechanic. There is nothing bad I can say about him. There was one time when I was on holiday and Jack had in his possession a checkbook I had signed. They were all blank. There isn't anyone else I could do that with. An emotional Miss Edgar continued. People think because Jack is big and not good at reading and writing that he is some kind of oaf, but he isn't. She added that Womes was a great lover of water sports and his family were well known in the area for the love of the water. Miss Edgar said that a radio receiver found in Womes' car was used for his water sports and nothing else. The court also heard a written statement from the owner of a hotel in which Tate, Rolfe, Donna Garwood and 2 pals stayed when visiting Ostend in November 1995. Proprietor of the Burlington Hotel, Maria Vandervey, remembered the visit by the group but commented that she was not at all happy with their behaviour. During the group's stay at her hotel, Rolfe and Tate became very drunk and a smoke detector was smashed, setting off fire alarms at the premises. Tate and the rest of the group then left the following morning, allegedly taking back to the United Kingdom thousands of pounds in cash refunded after a cannabis deal backfired. Womes and Steele deny a charge of conspiracy to import cannabis. Steele denies possessing a pump-action shotgun. Co-defendant Peter Corey of London Road, Clacton, Essex, denies a charge of conspiracy to import cannabis. The case continues.